As I was reading this chapter, in Esther chapter 3, I was reminded of a great and wonderful game show. And you know the game show, I am sure. You ever watched The Family Feud before? Oh, man, I love The Family Feud. You got these two apparent families that are side by side, and they've got a feud, I guess. They have to compete with questions that 100 people apparently were asked. I don't know how true that really was, but I know that game show is still going on, but the family feud together through this competition. It's a fun little show that I kind of grew up on. Then I was reminded of another feud. Real famous feud. In fact, we're famous now at Bakerton Bible Church because we had one person that was, I believe, a part of that feud. And I can't remember what side of the family she was on. It was the Hatfield and McCoy feud down in southern West Virginia, the east part of Kentucky. And in 1878, the feud kind of began before that, but in 1878, this feud between the famous families, the Hatfield and McCoys, began. And it supposedly really began when the McCoys accused the Hatfields from stealing a pig, one of their pigs. You know that story. And so this battle was just across the Tug Creek, or what was it called again? The Tug River down there in southern West Virginia. The Tug Fork River, that's what it was. And so they battled, and it started this bloodbath between these families going at one another. It got so bad that I believe I heard that the governors from West Virginia and Kentucky sent the militia down to help squash this feud with this family. Well, those things have gone on over and over again. And it's finally subsided, even though, even now, people of the McCoys and Hatfields probably tease about it to some extent. There's another feud in the scriptures that was going on for years, hundreds of years. In Exodus 17, we start hearing about this feud as the children of Israel come out of the land of Egypt. They finally get established as God's covenant people. And the first people group that go and attack the Israelites are none other than the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites descend from Esau. And the Amalekites, they come and attack the Israelites. And of course, as many of you probably already know, the Amalekites lost that battle. But the feud continued. And it didn't end, at least so we thought, until 900 years later. And we read that account in 1 Samuel 15. God declares to King Saul to go. He commands King Saul, Israelite army, to go and totally annihilate the Amalekites. So much so that they are to kill all the men, all the women, and the children. And they weren't to take the spoils. They were to destroy everything. That was God's judgment on the wicked people of the Amalekites. But you remember that story. Saul goes in. He kills most people. He takes and captures King Agag of the Amalekites. Brings him in, but doesn't kill King Agag. And he takes the spoil from the people there. Takes the best stuff. And then a prophet comes, Samuel, and he says, "What have you done? What have you done?" And King Saul, of course, says, "Well, I've kept the best stuff so that we could sacrifice it to the Lord." And then we find out, well, that's not exactly why he did what he did. He did what he did because he feared the people. And the people told him that we need to take the spoils. And so he gave in. And as a result of his disobedience, this feud continued on. Well, in 1 Samuel 15, verse 33, we find that Samuel takes care of business. And he says here, And Samuel said to King Agag, "As your sword has made women childless, so shall your mother be childless among women." And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord in Gilgal. Well, happy Mother's Day, right? What a story. That's the end of it, correct? The family feud, it's done. The Amalekites are no more. The Israelites are still there. But what we find as we turn to the book of Esther, something kind of intriguing that the author of this story puts in there. And I made mention of it the last time that I spoke in chapter 2. We are introduced to a character named Mordecai. And in chapter 2, verse 5, we read this. Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamite, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. And I said to everybody who was listening, that's important. Why would the author of this book, this narrative here, why would he put that in there? Why didn't he just say, Mordecai, he's a Jew, right? Why did he have to put all the additional information in there about his lineage? Well, what we find out here is that it says, son of Kish. We find out, if we go back to 1 Samuel, that there was somebody else who came from the line of Kish. See, Kish had more than one son. One of the sons that he had is from the lineage of Mordecai. But another son that he had was named Saul. Saul was a Benjamite. So was Mordecai. King Saul, as you remember, as I just said, was commanded by God to totally annihilate the Amalekites. And King Agag specifically. And he chose to disobey. Samuel takes care of the situation. So the family feud is over, correct? In chapter 3, let's just look at that real quick and then we'll come back. It says this. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. Why did the person who penned this story, this account down, have to add that? I think it's important that we're reminded, at least here, just a little application, that past sins, things that we don't take care of now, can end up biting us in the future in a big way. The author here wants to remind us that, we've got a conflict. We got a Benjamite who's in some kind of leadership, and now we have an Agagite. And feuds don't die quickly, do they? At this point, we're probably looking at maybe about 1,200 years since that point when the Amalekites came after the children of Israel. And then maybe another 300-400 years, 500 years after King Saul was disobedient and Samuel killed King Agag. Maybe about 500 years, and now we're here. Seems that God's doing something, isn't he? Family feuds don't die quickly. But as we're introduced here with Mordecai once again, let's turn back to Esther chapter 2. We're going to pick things up again with Mordecai. So we're introduced to Mordecai just a little bit in that first part of chapter 2. And then in verse 19, we begin again. Now, when the virgins were gathered together the second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Just as a reminder, remember in chapter 2, that was the big beauty pageant that occurred, right? This was the beauty pageant where all the fair ladies around the kingdom came and were brought before King Ahasuerus to see if they could make the cut, to see if they would be crowned queen. That could have been thousands of women. Could have been thousands of women. And then we have, after Queen Esther, she receives the crown. She found favor in the eyes of the king. We notice that Mordecai, I think, received a position after all this. Now when the virgins were gathered together the second time, so something happened, there was time that passed, and I would believe that as a result of his relationship with Queen Esther probably got him a position that he didn't have before. So we see that God is guiding Mordecai. God guides the attention of Mordecai, specifically in this section here. And he allows Mordecai to be in the right place. He allows Mordecai to be in the right place. Now, just to recall once again, as you read the book of Esther, and I encourage you to go back and read it. It's a wonderful, wonderful account of God's providential work through his people. And remember, providence is God's working to protect and preserve his creation, his people, his creation, and to work out his divine purposes throughout it. And it's an incredible account of how God, who's completely in control, also allows us to make actual choices. We're not robots. We're not puppets on a string. And if you read that, you can tell that easily from this account. These people did what they wanted to do. Everybody. And God worked through that situation. And so we see here that he is bringing Mordecai into a position that he could not have received on his own. And so now he's sitting at the king's gate. He's at the right place. He's at the right place. And he gets ready to hear the right thing. Esther had, verse 20, Esther had not made known her kindred or her people as Mordecai had commanded her. For Esther obeyed Mordecai just as when she was brought up by him. In those days, as Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, Bakerton and Teresh, two of the king's eunuchs, who guarded the threshold, became angry and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And this came to the knowledge of Mordecai. And he told it to Queen Esther. And Esther told it to the king in the name of Mordecai. And so what we have here, we have Mordecai being in the right place at the right time, hearing the right thing at the right time, and Mordecai knew the right person. All these coincidences, right? Maybe you're that kind of person. I don't know if you are. Hopefully, at the end of this story, at the end of this account, you'll never say, man, that was such a coincidence. There are no coincidences in this life. None. Things happen for a reason. Okay? We're not evolutionists that believe that there's just random chance accidents that occur. No. Our world, we were created for a purpose. And God has his plan, has his story set, and it is occurring. And it is happening. So things that happen in your life happen for a reason. The good things and the bad things. And for that, we should be thankful. Even the bad things that happen to us have a purpose behind them. You know, it's sometimes difficult to think about that. Because some of us have gone through some bad stuff. Some difficult things. And you have to ask the question, and you typically do. Why? Why? Sometimes I don't know. Don't know what the answer to those why questions are. Sometimes. But we know they're for a good purpose. We continue on. So we see here, he tells Queen Esther in verse 23, when the affair was investigated and found to be so, the men were both hanged on the gallows. And it was recorded in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Those two things are going to come right back up again. Gallows. Now, that's not a reference to being hanged around the neck by a noose. What they did at that time is they would take a long pole and they would pierce the person and stand them up on end so that everyone would see what had happened to them. And so that's what happened to these men. They were pierced by these long wooden poles and suspended in air. That's what the gallows were. I don't know how they were suspended in such a way, but they were. And then the Chronicles are going to be brought up once again later on in this book. Well, that was it. What was typical in that day and age, when someone would do something good for the king, they would typically reward them. Notice we don't hear any word of Mordecai being rewarded for his good effort, for his good deed. What do we hear? Chapter 3, as I just read. After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, and advanced him, and set his throne above all the officials who were with him. And all the king's servants who were at the king's gate bowed down and paid homage to Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai did not bow down or pay homage. Did not bow down or pay homage. You got to ask the question, why did he not bow down before Mordecai? We have a commercial prelude. Sure you silence your phones? You got to ask the question, why didn't he bow down before Haman? You know, all of this could have been taken care of. All of this could have been missed. None of these things that are getting ready to be described had to happen if Mordecai would have just bowed down. Now, some have said that Mordecai didn't want to bow down because it was an act of worship. But as we look here, that's not what's happening. He's not being commanded to worship Haman. All he's commanded to do is just to pay homage to, respect, and honor. And there's nothing in the Bible that says that a person's not allowed to do that. So what is it? Well, I think possibly, though it's not clear, I think possibly. I guess the real answer is I'm not really sure. But here's two thoughts of why he didn't bow down. One is that Haman was promoted, he was advanced, and Mordecai wasn't. And Mordecai was the guy, what did he do? He saved the king's life. And Haman was promoted. I don't know what the scenario or the story behind that was, but Mordecai was not rewarded for his good deed, even though it was recorded in the Chronicles of what happened. The second thing why he may not have bowed down before Haman, and actually it could be a combination, is that he knew Haman was an Agagite. And that bitter feud was still fueled. And he wouldn't bow down before that wicked man, that Agagite. In fact, Mordecai probably realizes that because of his forefathers' disobedience, that this man is in authority. And it just fuels things even more. It's the Hatfield and McCoys all over again. But we notice here that God is the one who's guiding the promotion of Haman. God does this. So when we bicker and we complain about the men and women in office or in some kind of authority, we need to be reminded that though we don't want them there, that they do not receive authority unless it is given to them from above. You remember Jesus said the same thing to Pilate. Pilate says, don't you know I have the authority to save you? I have the authority to kill you. And Jesus says, you don't have any authority unless it's given to you from above. Even wicked Pilate. So even the men and women in office right now, in some kind of authority, that they're abusing their authority, they're poor leaders, they're evil people, God has placed them there for a reason and for his purposes. Even these things sift through the hands of God. And we have to remind ourselves. And this teaching on God's control or his sovereignty gives so much peace to our lives. Just to be reminded, I have no clue, God, why you allowed that person to leave. But we know it's from you. And we can rest in that. Because all things are good. Now, that doesn't mean we might not receive the negative effects of their leadership. But it does remind us that God's in control. And he's taking care of us. So we can rest in that. That doesn't mean we don't act. But we can rest, even though some difficult things are coming our way. So God allows Haman to be in the right family. He was an Agagite. He was a Malachite. God allows Haman to be promoted to the right position. He puts Haman in that position. Haman wanted that position. God allows Haman to know the right person. Or God allows Haman to be put off by the right person. He gets put off by Mordecai. And it eats him up. This man, Haman, is so proud that when one person doesn't bow before him, it tears him up. Later on in this book, we find out that he goes on to describe all the riches that he has. He goes on to describe all the sons that he has and how proud he is of them. But none of those things, he says, satisfy him or will make him happy until Mordecai bows before him. Nothing in this world is going to make you happy. Nothing in this world is going to satisfy you. The only thing that will satisfy you is that you find your joy and happiness not in our government, but in Jesus Christ. You will not find your happiness in your family, or in your husband, or in your wife, or in your mother or father. You will only find happiness found in Christ and Christ alone. Well, so we see that God allows him to be put off by the right person. As we keep on reading here. Then the king, verse 3, and then the king's servants who were at the king's gate said to Mordecai, why do you transgress the king's command? So not only was Mordecai disobeying Haman, he was also disobeying the king, which might kind of share a little bit more that maybe he was put off by how he was treated. That he protected the king, he saved the king, but he wasn't rewarded for what he did. So maybe Mordecai was put off a little bit. And when they spoke to him day after day, verse 4, and he would not listen to them, they told Haman in order to see whether Mordecai's words would stand. For he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai would not bow down or pay homage to him, Haman was filled with fury. But he disdained to lay hands on Mordecai alone. So as they had made known to him the people of Mordecai, Haman sought to destroy all of the Jews, the people of Mordecai, throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus. So it wasn't good enough for Haman just to go and assassinate Mordecai, right? Which he could have done easily. No. After finding out where his lineage was from, the Jewish people, He says, it's not good enough for me to take out Mordecai. I want to take out the whole family. Family feuds are hard to die. And so, the struggle begins. The tension arises between the Jewish people and this Agagite. God also allows him, Haman, to persecute his people at the right time. Verses 7 at the end of the chapter says, in the first month, which is the month of Nisan, in the 12th year of King Ahasuerus, they cast pur. That is, they cast lots. But Haman, day after day, before Haman, day after day, and they cast it month after month, till the 12th month, which is the month of Adar. Then Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there's a certain people scattered abroad and dispersed among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from those of every other people, and they don't keep the king's laws, so that it's not to the king's profit to tolerate them. If it please the king, let it be decreed that they be destroyed, and I'll pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who have charge over the king's business, that they may put it into the king's treasuries. So the king took his signet ring from his hand and gave it to Haman, the Agagite, the son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. And the king said to Haman, the money is given to you, the people also, to do with them as it seems good to you. Then the king's scribes were summoned on the 13th day of the first month, and an edict, according to all that Haman commanded, was written to the king's satraps and to the governors over all the provinces and to the officials of the peoples, to every province in its own script and every people in its own language. It was written in the name of King Ahasuerus and sealed with the king's signet ring. Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instructions to destroy, to kill, and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, in one day. I think they have enough adjectives there: kill, destroy, kill, and annihilate. The 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. That's very similar to the command that God gave King Saul hundreds of years earlier. A copy of the document was to be issued as a decree in every province by proclamation to all peoples to be ready for that day. The couriers went out hurriedly by order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink, but the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. Now we see here this king, King Ahasuerus, that I'm not really sure I would make the same kind of decisions that he did. He didn't even look at the decree. He said, just do whatever you want. He didn't even ask questions about, well, who's this people that been frustrated to? He doesn't ask anything. King Ahasuerus is a little bit of a dupe in this whole narrative. So we see here that God allows him, Haman, to persecute God's people at the right time. At the right time. We notice here that they cast lots, and this is what we find out the holiday Purim that the Jewish people celebrate in December. This is where it comes from. It comes from the casting of lots. And so it's kind of confusing here in this translation what they're talking about, but what's being said is before they cast lots before Haman day after day. What they were trying to do is they had these lots, whatever they were made out of, they threw them down, and if they came up at the right, whatever the right symbols were, then they would pick the particular day. So for 30 days, one day, not that day, 2 day, They got all the way to the 13th, they cast lots, and the lots fell on the 13th day. And then they did the same thing for the months. So each month they cast lots to see which month would be the time that they were to go and annihilate, destroy, and kill the Jewish people and take their plunder. And so the lot fell on the 13th day of the 12th month. And so the persecution was to occur at the right time. At the right time. All these things were sifted through the hand of God. God guided the attention of Mordecai so that he would somehow know of the occurrence of those two eunuchs that they wanted to kill the king. It happened that he knew the right person, Esther, and she was able to tell King Ahasuerus what happened. And it just so happened that he did not receive the reward that was due him for the right reason. We also see that God was guiding Haman, this wicked, evil man, and brought him and put him in the right position. That he was put off by the right person. That Haman had the right lineage. And he went and planned to persecute the Jewish people at the right time. And this was all designed by God to bring about his purposes. And so how do we conclude? I was reminded of Proverbs 18:10, that the name of the Lord is a strong tower, and the righteous runs into it and is safe. And whatever difficulties that you might be going through or will go through in the future, whether persecution comes upon the Christian church in the United States of America, whether it doesn't, but if it does, we have to be reminded that God is the one who's in control. He is our strong tower. He is the one that brings satisfaction. He is the one that brings joy. When everyone else is unjust, he isn't. When everyone else gives up, he doesn't. When no one seems to notice, he does. When no one seems to care, he always will. Even when God seems distant, he is present. Even when God seems removed, he remains sovereign and faithful. Maybe perhaps that's exactly the lesson that God wants you to learn all over again today. God is our strong tower. He is the one working out his plan in our lives, in our state, and in the world. And the Lord Jesus Christ is going to be exalted and lifted up